Again, my name is Andy. I've been doing resilience training for quite a while, so let me give you a little introduction, a little bit more about what I've done in the past and where I'm going in the future. And so this is me. This is my wife. She's actually over there in the back. She helps me keep me on track. And then, so what I do for my day job is I train soldiers in sport and performance psychology and resiliency. And most of those soldiers that I work with are some of the most elite soldiers in the world. They're special forces soldiers and Army Ranger soldiers. So these guys are going and they're fighting the fight, and they have to really be able to bounce back from adversity because they're doing some of the hardest work the military is asking them to do. And then also, I've been surfing big waves since about 2007 or so, and I've learned a lot about myself and what it takes to overcome challenges. I've had my fair share of injuries that I've had to overcome, and those injuries have taught me a lot about not just bouncing back, but bouncing back from different challenges that we've experienced in life. So I'll talk about some of those here in a little bit too, but let's go ahead and get into it. So what is resilience? Actually, before we get into that, let's talk about this for just a moment. I think there's something really valuable about having a learner's mindset. So a learner's mindset is having a curious mind, coming with the intent to learn, grow, and learn and as you make mistakes, learn from those mistakes. If you go through life with a learner's mindset, you'll learn a lot more information. You'll become a better person. You'll be able to progress a lot more just in life as you have this kind of learner's mindset throughout your whole entire life. And then the other part about here is just be present, which I don't think that'll be an issue here. So anyways, now let's talk about resilience. So just a definition of what resiliency is. It's the ability to learn, thrive, and grow in the face of challenges and bounce back from adversity. So this thing called resilience is extremely important in every single person's life. Because if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that you're going to experience challenges. There's going to be adversity every step of the way, regardless of what you're trying to accomplish. And so how we view those challenges has a huge influence on how we react to those challenges. So when it comes to resiliency, I want to briefly touch on 5 different pillars or ingredients to what a resilient person needs to have or obtain or work towards. And with these different pillars, they will. It's really, the research shows what a resilient person needs to have. So let's talk about what those 5 are real briefly. First is awareness or self-awareness. You got to be able to understand how your thoughts influence your emotions and your behaviors. The next one is control, how to regulate those emotions and behaviors. So it's one thing to understand that I'm mad right now. It's another thing to be able to control when I'm mad right now, right? So, or it's another way to be, I understand that I'm frustrated, but how do I then control the frustration? So understanding how your thoughts influence your emotions and then being able to control them is really the foundation for understanding how your brain works. Also, number 3, optimism. So optimism is just simply having hope. Hope that you can overcome challenges. Hope that you can that things will get better, that this challenge will be an obstacle to make me a better person for whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. And then 4th is having flexibility. So flexibility, really, it's about thinking accurately. It's about recognizing the value in other people's perspective. Sometimes the answers to the questions that you might have will come in very interesting ways and can sometimes come from people that you wouldn't expect. So having that open mind into when you have a challenge or you have a question, as to being really open, or be very open to where those answers might come from, because sometimes you'll be very surprised. And then also part of that is understanding and solving problems and willingness to try new strategies. And then fifth, relationships. So relationships, this one is really, really important. Each person needs to have at least one person that they can rely on. They need to have at least one person that they can pick up the phone and feel like they can call. And as you all know, some people are really good at building relationships, and other people are not as good at building relationships. And I have found that building relationships is a skill. It's like, how do you get good at playing any sport, playing basketball? How do you get good at it? You play the thing, you play basketball, right? So there's several different strategies that we can build on to help us build stronger relationships. So for today, what we're going to be discussing, actually I'm going to skip this part due to time. We are going to talk about 3 skills of these 11 that I teach. So the first one is event, thought, outcome. The next one is detecting beliefs. And then this last one is competence, autonomy, and relatedness, also known as CAR. Okay, so these are the 3 skills that we're going to be talking about today. All right, let's dive into ETO, event, thought, outcome. This is the foundation for how your brain works, okay? So the E stands for event. Now an event is a situation that happens throughout your day. It could be a challenge, it could be an obstacle, it could be positive. They're just things that happen. Okay, so what was the first thing that happened when you woke up today? Someone go ahead and tell me. One thing that happened.
I opened my eyes.
You opened your eyes. There you go. And maybe even before that, the alarm clock went off, right? So that's the first one that was my first activating event today. Another activating event, you walked into the building today, right? And you're like, some faces you might know, some people you might not know, right? Another event is that I started talking, right? You're like, who's this stranger? Another activating event that you might have had, maybe you hit a little bit of traffic coming into work, right? Maybe you started brushing your teeth. That's an activating event. So this morning, you've already had several different events that have happened, okay? Now, events aren't necessarily good or bad, but we're going to talk about what makes them good, bad, or just things that happen that are neither good nor bad. So that is your thought. So your thoughts or your interpretation of the event, what you thought in that moment, is the component that drives your outcome, okay? So in other words, it is your thoughts that drive your emotions, how you feel, and your reactions, what you do. So here is what most people, or a lot of people don't really understand, is oftentimes people think it's the event that makes them feel this way or react this way. And the reality is, it is your thoughts about those events that drive the way that you feel and the things that you do. So what do we also always have control over? We have control over the way that we think. But we don't always have control over the events, the things that happen to us. So this becomes extremely valuable because this gives you the control. And it's the reality, is you have control over the way that you feel and the way that you act. And a lot of times I'll hear people say things like this: you made me mad, or this thing's making me frustrated. And the reality is, it's not that thing or that person. It's the way you're thinking about that thing or the way that you're thinking about that situation that, again, drives the way that you feel and the way that you act. So let's go through a couple different examples of this. So here's an example of some ineffective thinking. Okay, so your event, there's a change in leadership. And you think, what is happening? Will I still have a job? And that's your thought. You start ruminating on that. It would then make sense that you would feel some fear and uncertainty. And your reaction, maybe your heart starts pounding and you start gossiping with some of the people that you work with, right? So this right here is not coming from the change in leadership. It's coming from the way that you're thinking about the change in leadership. So let's look at another example of effective thinking. Okay? So we got the same event, a change in leadership. And you think to yourself, I will show the new leadership how valuable I am. And then that would make sense that the emotion is that you feel confident, and the reaction is that you focus your attention on your work. And you don't even think to gossip. You don't even think to talk to other coworkers about it because you're like, I got a plan, I know how to handle this situation. So again, it's not events, it's not the things in your life that drive the outcomes, the emotions and reactions. It is the way you think about those things. And I'm going to drive that home, say it several other times, because it's so important to understand that throughout your whole entire lives. All right. So let me actually, before I get into this next one, I want to share with you guys an example. So I don't know if you know, but I have a little piece of like tape right here on my neck. So this was on Friday, February 7th. I actually got in a surfing accident and broke my neck. I know it seems crazy right now that I'm standing here. And I'll tell you right now, it is crazy that I'm standing here. So I was surfing at Sunset Beach. The waves were big. And I jumped head first like I had done 1,000 times. But this time I hit the water a little different. My shoulder pushed into the water, but my head kind of pushed the opposite way, and it snapped my C7 vertebrae. And gave me a herniated disc that was pushing on a nerve that made my arm go numb at the same time. So immediately I thought my arm broke. And I'm like, in big surf, thought my arm was broken, and I look up to see another giant wave about to break on my head. And instantly I thought, okay, I got this. And I might have been lying to myself, but in that moment, that was all I could do, right? Was take a deep breath, stay as calm as possible, grab my arm that wasn't really working very well, and try and get underwater. The way it picked me up, I got super pounded, came up to see another one. And that wave was just as big, and it was just as terrifying, and I had to just tell myself, hey, you got this. So I grabbed my arm, got super pounded, holding my arm the whole time, just the water taking hold of me, came up, was able to one-arm paddle to the channel, where luckily there was a jet ski and lifeguards that were able to get me in and didn't have any other issues getting in. Ended up going to the hospital. They told me I had a cracked vertebrae, the C7, and the next day they gave me surgery and fused 2 vertebrae together with some metal plates, and I was able to walk out of the hospital. My arm has been getting a little stronger every day, and the reason I tell you this story is because there's 2 ways that a person tends to think in these situations. One way is the kind of like the why me kind of mentality, right? Like the why did this have to happen? It's kind of like the bitter way of thinking. And what happens is if I have the bitter type of thought, the why me, like this is, the timing, it couldn't be worse. My wife and I were supposed to go to Korea actually today, and I had to cancel the trip, right? And so there's a lot that we kind of lost at stake too. And there's a lot of bitter type thoughts that I could easily create. But then there's the other way of thinking. And that's the how grateful I am. And it's been really interesting going through this experience. And I've been through other experiences kind of similar to this that were pretty painful. And I've realized that there's so much to be grateful for. And I had a lot of people rally behind me. I had friends reaching out that I hadn't talked to in a really long time. I've had people bring food. I've had people, really taking care of me. And I let myself, or I chose to let my brain go that way, towards the being very grateful and being really thankful for the opportunity to grow and to learn. And sometimes I'll find my mind going back to the This is really painful. I wish that this didn't happen type of thought. And whenever my mind goes there, I remind myself of the people and the learning experience that I'll have from this experience. Now, that's another example. That's my own real life example, right? Each of you have different experiences that you've had where your brain can go one of two ways. It can go towards the way of the bitter, the why me type of thoughts, or you can lean towards the what can I learn from this? How can I become a better human being for having gone through this? And I'm a firm believer that it's through the challenges that you go through that make you the best person that you can be. And it's through our challenges that we learn and grow. It's when we don't get that job that we really wanted that we can grow and we can learn and make ourselves better to get that job and whatnot. So let's talk a little bit about the same idea, but but applied towards failure. Okay? Because that's one thing that all of us will experience in our lives is failing different things in our lives. And how we respond to failure has a huge influence on how we keep progressing and growing. So, let's say the event is that you failed a goal, whatever that is. And each of you have different jobs. So within your job, just imagine that you had failed some sort of goal for a moment, okay? Or maybe think of some goal that you failed in the past. We have a whole nother thing that is influencing our thoughts, and that is our beliefs, okay? Your beliefs are going to be one of the largest contributors to the way that you think. So if you have the belief about failure is permanent, or if I don't succeed, I'm a failure, or something like I'm never good enough. If you have these types of beliefs about yourself or the situation, it would then explain why you have the thought, I'm terrible at this job, why am I here? Okay? And then it would then explain why you had the outcome that you're sad and disappointed and keep to yourself and ignore your coworkers. Okay? So this is like one way of thought that people can have where failure leads to doubt. Okay? Now let's look at the other side of this. So let's look at failure that leads to growth. So, same goal or same event is that you failed a goal. The belief that maybe you have is, or someone would have that leads to growth, is success comes from failures. Failure is the greatest teacher. Challenges help me grow. These types of beliefs that you might have are going to then explain why you would have the thought, what can I learn? What changes can I make to find success? So why are you thinking this way? It will tend to come from the type of beliefs that you have. So if you find that you have these types of beliefs, you can change that. You can tell yourself and adopt new styles of beliefs, like these three over here. So from this thought, then we know we have our emotions and our reactions, or our behaviors. And that would explain why you feel, even though you failed a goal, you would feel excited and hope and ask for constructive criticism for success. So that would explain why you then go to either your boss or you go to somebody that you trust at work and you ask them, hey, what can I do to improve? I really want to know. And have that learner growth mindset. So this style of belief and thought, it's what's going to lead to a growth mindset and a growth in failure. So I saw, fairly recently, I saw an interview with Kobe Bryant. So you guys all know who Kobe is, right? He's one of the GOATs, right? This guy's insane. And it was an interviewer, and she asked him, she said, So there seems to be two types of players in the league that play basketball. Those that are motivated by winning, and those that are motivated by not wanting to lose. And Kobe kind of looked at her and she was like, I'm neither of those. Those aren't my motivation. He said, I'm motivated to learn. And then he went on to say, he's like, when I get the ball, I'm looking for different holes. I'm looking for ways to get around people. I'm watching and paying attention to what I can learn from them to pick holes in their game so I can get around it. So in other words, all of his attention when he played basketball was about learning and growing. It wasn't about being motivated to win or motivated to not lose. It was all about growth. And that's what made him so good. And that's what makes each of you so good, is when you're motivated to learn as much as you possibly can in your industry, in your job. And when you do that, that's when you grow. That's when you find this beautiful thing of knowledge that just compounds and compounds and compounds, because you have that learner's mindset and you have that way of thought that progresses even in failure. And I remember, I know a lot of coaches will have their teams try and get teams that are way better than them to play them. Why do you think coaches do that? What do you think? To learn. Exactly. Because it's through failure, coaches understand that it's through failure that you'll learn the most. Because when you win, then you're like, oh, I did it. I don't need to learn and grow because I already did the thing. I know how to do it. But when you lose, that's when you got to figure it out. And that's when growth happens. Only if you let it and you have that type of mindset. And you don't have that poor me, oh, look at me, I'm so bad type of mindset. So that's how we develop a growth mindset, and that's how we develop a mindset that will help you improve through failures. So this idea is extremely important, not just in your job, but in life in general. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of a shift, and we're going to talk about another concept that I learned this maybe 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and I promised myself that I would teach anybody that is in any leadership position this concept every time I have the opportunity. Because what this is it is the recipe to be a solid, be a leader that allows your people to thrive. So a lot of you have management positions. Some of you have positions where you have to lead people. If you aren't in one of those positions, you probably will be at some point in your life. So this right here, and even if you have children, this is very much applicable towards that. Any type of leadership, this applies. So we need CAR to thrive at work. And this comes from the researchers, Ryan and DC, and they developed it. It's called self-determination theory. So if you don't have that written down, write it down, because as a leader of any kind, you're going to want to know a lot about this, okay? So the C stands for competence. When it comes to leading people, you got to teach them what they need to do to be successful, right? So in other words, competence is the ability to do something successfully. So if you're a mechanic and you have another mechanic that you're teaching, you got to teach them how to do the job, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be a very good mechanic. Regardless of what your job is, you have to have a skill set to be able to do that job. So you got to be able to teach your people how to do that job, okay? The next component is autonomy. This one, people don't realize how important this is. It's the feeling that one has a choice. Has anyone in this room been micromanaged before? Who here likes being micromanaged? No hands, right? Nobody likes being micromanaged. And you know why? This is why. It takes away your autonomy. It takes away your ability to make your own choices. So what a really good leader does, or a really good manager does, is they teach them how to do the thing, whatever it is. Then they will give them the ability to make choices within that thing. So I'm going to come back to a mechanic example. So in other words, you teach somebody how to do take out brakes or replace brakes. You teach them how every step of the way, and then you let them do it. You don't come over their shoulder right and tell them, like, do this, do that, do this. And you might have to do that at the beginning, but then you have to take a step back. And that can be hard for some people, especially if control is something that you really enjoy or you really like. But when we do that, we strip the thrivingness of a person at their job. So the next one is relatedness. Now, relatedness is really interesting because it's feeling connected and a sense of belongingness with others. So what this means is, really in a nutshell, you need to work with people that you can relate with. Okay? Now let me give you an example of all of this and how this works. Okay? Have you ever had a job where you had autonomy, you had relatedness? So in other words, your manager, the person in charge of you, let you do whatever you needed to do within your job. They didn't micromanage you. You liked the people that you worked with, but you had no idea what you were doing. How would that go? Not so good, right? Because you'd just be like, I don't know what to do, right? So have you ever had a job where you knew what you were doing, maybe you were actually really good at this job, you liked the people you worked with, but you were micromanaged? How does that feel? It's awful. You're not going to want to work there. In fact, I know a lot of people that have quit their jobs for that reason. People that were really, really good at their jobs quit because they were micromanaged. They couldn't handle it. And all their boss needed to do was just take a step back and let them fly. So that's autonomy. And then relatedness. How many of you have had a job where you had autonomy, so your boss allowed you to work within your sphere and make your own decisions? You had competence, in other words, you were really good at doing this job, but you just didn't like the people you worked with. Has anyone been in that situation? Yeah. It's awful, right? So when any of these are missing, you're going to find that person will not be happy at that job. And oftentimes that's when people quit, because they can't handle it and they don't enjoy the job because one of these are missing. When you have a job that you're competent at, you know what you're doing, you have freedom of choice within that job, and then you like at least the one or two of the people that you work with. You don't have to like everybody. Relatedness isn't about feeling connected to every single person, at least one or two people. Okay? And you have that, that's when people will take less pay because they enjoy the job. Because the culture of that job, when a company has this as their culture, people stay with that job because they will thrive in that environment. So this right here is one of the most, I think, interesting and important components to being a manager or a leader of any kind, is when you develop these with all the people that you work with, you will find that those people will want to stay. So we talked about how our thoughts influence our emotions and our behaviors. We talked about how important it is that we have that growth mindset, how important it is that we look at failure as a way to grow, as a way to learn, as a way to get to where we're going. And then we talked about this component of CAR,